Let's talk about center channel speakers. Center channel speakers is the one speaker that is probably the most important in your system. Yet it does seem to be overlooked the most and quite possibly have some pretty poor sounding speakers as well on the market. Now, it's kind of hard to find a good center channel speaker, one where the voices are going to come through. Let's face it, if you're watching movies and you can't hear the voices, what good is the movie or any other TV that you're watching? Over here I have the SVS Ultra and SVS Prime Center Channel speakers. I'm going to just briefly go over the specifications. Forgot my glasses. Okay, so the SVS Ultra Center, which is right over here, is rated at 45 Hertz to 32 kilohertz. The impedance is 8 ohms and the sensitivity is 87 decibels. Now the recommended amplifier power is 20 to 225 watts, and it weighs 31 pounds. Next speaker, the SVS Prime Center, which is rated at 48 Hertz to 25 kilohertz. And I do think it's kind of interesting how the Prime is rated at 48 and the Ultra is rated at 45. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But the Prime is also 8 ohms. The sensitivity is 86 decibels, which I do think is a little bit low for this speaker. Of course, when I compared it to other speakers that are rated at like 89 or 90, it seemed to be pretty much about the same volume. Even on the receiver, I really didn't have to change it. The volume sounded about the same. So it's rated at 86. It might be more like 88 or 89. The recommended power is 20 to 200 watts. Each of these speakers has 2 ports on the rear. I'm gonna get my gloves on and I'll turn them around for you if I can. Let's see. The Prime has a 1-inch tweeter, and the mid-range is 3.5 inches, and the woofers are 5.25 inches. The crossover is at 2.4 kilohertz from the mid-range to the tweeter, and 350 hertz from the mid-range to the woofers. Now on the Ultra, the crossover is at 2 kilohertz from the mid-range to the tweeter and 500 hertz from the mid-range to the woofer. Okay. Now it has a 1-inch tweeter, and this is a 4-inch mid-range and 5.5-inch woofers. So the mid-range on this one to me looks so much bigger than that one, even though it's only 1/2 inch. Just amazing how much bigger. I mean, this whole speaker it looks so much bigger. Look at it. Nice looking speaker too. This one in particular. I mean, that one's okay. It's not a bad looking speaker, but I really like how this one looks, especially in lighting at night when it's kind of dark. It has a nice shine about the cones and everything else around it, like all this. Whereas this over here is kind of dull. This over here is really like shiny and nice. It pops out. Let's see. So those are the specs. I'm gonna get my notes. Okay, so let's talk about the SVS Prime Center. Now each of these speakers, I ran them with my Onkyo RZ630 receiver, which is 90 watts, and I ran them with my Marantz, which is right down there, 7013 at 125 watts a channel. So the results were kind of interesting. Now at 90 watts a channel, okay, on the Onkyo, and the Onkyo has nice clear sound, okay. In my opinion, the sound of an Onkyo receiver is kind of like if you took the Marantz. I think we turn it off. So in my opinion, the sound of an Onkyo receiver is kind of like if you took Marantz and Denon and you kind of merge them together, or the Marantz receiver and the Denon receiver had a baby, and I feel like that's what it sounds like, because the Marantz is very warm sounding, and the Denon, in my opinion, is very kind of bright sounding and clear. It doesn't have much warmth to it, but I think the Onkyo has a nice balance between the two of them. So I do appreciate the sound of Onkyos, and I do kind of like the sound best, to be honest. So with that said, the Prime Center, in my opinion, with the 90 watt Onkyo with 90 watts fed to it, I thought it sounded not so good. The mid-range was good, the bass was good, but the overall clarity that was coming from the treble, not so good. So, I was kind of thinking to myself, this speaker sounds pretty bad. I'm not sure why so many people like it. Then I hooked it up to the Marantz, and when I fed it 125 watts, that's when it sounded much better. It was like night and day. I felt like I was listening to like two totally different speakers. Now, with that said, the things about the Prime Center over here that I think are kind of weak, the Ultra makes up for with everything. I mean, the Ultra is just such a nice sounding speaker, but I'm going to get to that. Okay, so the voices sounded great. The voices were never an issue. The depth of this speaker is great. The impact bass, when impact bass just shoots out from a movie, whatever it may be. I do have this up over here. Now, there are scenes from some movies. I mean, Live, Die, Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow. There's a ton of impact coming from there. Terminator, Dark Fate, guns, explosions, sparks, sharp sounds. Mad Max, Road Fury. This movie beats up every speaker in your system, so everything has to be top notch for that. War of the Worlds puts a lot of force and bass through the center channel, especially when the alien ships are making those noises. Gladiator, the 4K, or the Blu-ray, the 4K Blu-ray is amazing. Let's see, Blade Runner. There's a scene when, a quick spoiler, there's a scene when Ryan Gosling, his car is shot down, and that whole scene right before it and what happens is just fantastic sound. Really puts a lot of emphasis on the center, and especially when he pulls out his gun and he shoots. Okay, so that scene right there. Let's get back to the speakers. Okay, so the range on this between highs and lows when movies explode, it handles it very well. The bass on this is really tight bass. The ports in the rear, the ports in the rear blow a lot of air out of them, so there's a lot of bass coming out of the ports in the rear. Either of these speakers blend well with Definitive Tech towers. These are the ones with the 3 8-inch, the bipolar, and I do love these bipolar speakers. They're fantastic for movies. Let's see. Okay, so a con of this speaker is the high end of it, the high end clarity of it. Now, I did use the EQ, and it improved it a lot. Just using the EQ manually, going over there, boosting up the treble. That's really what I did. The higher end treble, I gave it a little bit of a boost, and then it sounded a lot better, at least to my ears. But, we all have different ears, and we all have different equipment and room acoustics and all that. So, everything's going to vary. So let's see. So the fine details on this, I find for some movies were getting lost. For example, when the rain hits the windshield of the flying car in Blade Runner, the Ultra sounded great. That, not so much without help from the EQ. Let's see. So with that said, at 125 watts, it sounded better than at 90. Now, maybe if your receiver is, 135, 140, 150 watts, who knows, maybe 200, excuse me, maybe it'll sound even better. Water break. With the Prime Center, I found that the crossover set to 80 hertz works out very well. I ran some test CDs where it sends frequencies that are bass, mid-range, and treble. Let's see, what did I write down here? 63 hertz on the test CD was probably the last of the lower bass that played at a pretty good volume. I know that this one is, what was this rated to? 48 hertz. I mean, it might get down to 55. I wouldn't even think about, the 40s with this. So 80 hertz, I feel like, is a nice place to have your crossover set. At 16 kilohertz, that was the last of the audible treble that I could hear. The test disc did go to 20 kilohertz. I know that a lot of people can't hear 20 kilohertz anyway. With that said, with this one, I was barely able to hear some 20 kilohertz. I did have to get closer though to hear it, but I could hear that, there was a little bit of that higher end treble, and I mean you can really hear the difference in the clarity between the two. SVS Ultra Center. I've really grown to love this speaker. This speaker, I mean, anything you throw at it, I don't think I've heard a center channel speaker that's quite this good. Now, this thing does typically sell for $700, and this one typically sells for around $350. So you're looking at a speaker that's twice the price. Is it worth it? Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to watching movies, because you have to be able to hear everything. For example, with The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, in the beginning, again, there's going to be a little bit of spoilers here. So, Smaug, when Smaug speaks, Smaug sounds good coming from this. Don't think Smaug doesn't. Again, with a little help from the EQ on the higher end, but Smaug sounds really good coming out of the Ultra. When I ran the test discs, the Ultra was strong to well below 50. Okay, so the 45 hertz rating that they gave it, I mean, that's good. I mean, I sent 40 hertz, 30, 20 hertz at it, and I think it was at 40 or 30 or something. Maybe it was 30, where the cones were moving like crazy, and out of the rear port, it was blowing a lot of air. The lower bass at 20 hertz, 30 hertz, you really couldn't hear anything. That's really the job for a sub. But this thing was really moving. It was impressive. I was shocked to even see it, moving like that, the cones. Let's see, where was I here? So with this speaker, I have the crossover from the receiver set at 60 hertz. I think 60 hertz is a nice setting for this one, because it does go down into the 40s. I mean, 40 hertz, you could still hear that the bass is still there. It's not the type of bass that I would say, I'm going to use only the speaker. I absolutely wouldn't, let the sub handle everything below. So by setting the crossover, you're getting some strong bass out of this speaker at 60 hertz, which I was also kind of shocked about that, especially the fact that, the bass is coming from the receiver, and it had good bass on the 90 watt Onkyo and the 125 watt Marantz, and it sounded very clear on the Onkyo as well. So, I'm not too sure about the SVS Prime. They're obviously is a big difference between these two speakers. So let's see, what else do I have here? Yeah, the treble was very strong for 16 kilohertz. Also, the mid-range on this speaker is fantastic. The mid-range on this is good, and it's probably better than a ton of speakers that's in the 300 or less range overall, because most of those are two-way speakers, and they might have some issues. But this speaker, it's like the mid-range is fantastic. Just this speaker is a beautiful speaker. It's beautiful to listen to, and it just sounds amazing. So with that said, I'm going to throw on my gloves and pick these up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to try to be careful with this one over here, because it is hooked up. And just so you can see the back quickly, you can see the ports. Oh, and you could also bi-amp it as well. So hopefully you could see that. And it just fits in there. Now I'm going to show you this one up close. Here's the rear. And it's always great to have a pair of gloves like these, something with some kind of nice rubber palms, so you really stick to them. And you also don't get any handprints on speakers, and especially when the speakers are like that piano gloss black stuff, which is just a total nightmare. Even if your hands are totally clean, you've just washed them or whatever, you touch them and there's prints. So ultimately, which speakers should you buy? You're talking 350 versus 700. I would suggest, if possible, save money. Whatever you have to do, even if it takes you a year, save the money, wait for a sale, try to get this one. It's just so much better. I mean, it's really like night and day. Yes, it does cost more, but every single thing that I've thrown at this, movies, TV shows, things that were affecting other center channel speakers, this one it took it like a champ. Everything fantastic. And the amount of bass that this thing puts out without having its own amp built into here is just fantastic. That one as well, the bass is also fantastic, but this one is just all around the higher end. The higher end is so much better, and the mid-range frequencies and the bass, just everything about it. I love this speaker, and I think that I would probably want one of these in any system that I set up in the future. It's just that good. It also blends well with a lot of different brands of speakers, whether it's Definitive Tech, Polk Audio. I do hope that you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. Check out the comments section, and thank you for watching.